Italy, land of olive trees and espresso, and the heir to a millennia of history and culture. France, undeniably sexy, impeccably dressed, renowned for its romantic capital and full of impossibly handsome Lotharios. These two nations maintain a philosophical divide that goes way beyond soccer tournaments. A specific and deep-seated undercurrent of rivalry divides them and persists in the US to this day, in boulangeries and bakeries and bread sections of supermarkets across the nation. The aim of this film is to address this rivalry, decide a winner, answer the question once and for all: who makes the best bread? This is John D'Angelo. John is 100% Sicilian. He's a retired school teacher and he now spends his days making artisan peasant bread from scratch, by hand, like they did in the old country. It's a long process. The bread demands time and patience and respect. The result is a firm, delicious loaf that sits humbly next to the meals he prepares for his family, heavy with the weight of his heritage. He knows where his allegiances lie.
Basically, the French and the Italian both make excellent bread, but the French kind of claim a superiority over it. They are more famous for things like the baguette, pain au levain. They use a lot of natural starters. The Italians don't. It's a matter of opinion, but I think we all know Italian bread's better.
I left the Niles city limits, stopped by to pick up some French bread, and headed to the countryside. First stop, Williamsfield, Ohio. I needed guns, big guns, and I know a man out here who isn't afraid to pull a trigger. That man is Rich Schlote, wolf breeder, orchid farmer, the very definition of red-blooded American firepower.
What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move it 25 yards because it's buckshot. Now if it was a slug, I could probably get away with 50 to 75 yards. But with buckshot, the spray will get bigger and bigger the further you go.
Do you think we'll have problems with this wind?
We shouldn't, because it's going to be close range.
First up, the baguette. The first shot lands. It may look okay on the outside, but internally, it's a mess. Now it's John's turn. We'll see how it fares up. Straight through. There's a hole, you can see daylight, but it's held up. I'm actually pretty impressed, both held up quite well under fire. The Italian bread took a hole through it, and the exit hole was kind of gross. The French bread, now I look at it, it is pretty shredded, and it fell apart kind of in the middle. There was no integrity to it. When I picked it up, it kind of flopped over. But that's not to, I mean, they still took a bullet, and it's quite impressive. But how would they fare in unarmed combat? This is Kevin Zalac, 210 pounds of pure, unadulterated Youngstown ultraviolence. If you want some bread destroyed, or a human being for that matter, Kevin's your man. First up, John's bread.
Actually, it's a pretty dense piece of bread. Seems pretty tough. The density is the main thing, especially when hitting. You can see it's already been shot by a shotgun and held up pretty well in terms of its structural integrity. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to damage this much or if it's going to be able to give back as good as it takes. We'll try a bare knuckle. Still pretty tough bread. Obviously with the bare knuckles you have more of a cutting surface to cut through the bread. Seemed like it gave out right where it was shot with a shotgun, which isn't a big surprise, but still, it's tough bread, man. Not impressed. Doesn't feel nearly as dense. You can see just by kind of palpating along the outer crust, it's already breaking a little bit. Bottom's very soft underbelly. I should be able to shred this.
It's gonna be pretty, is it?
No, actually I'm gonna try and just kick it once and break it.
All right.
Held up. It's broke. Held up the 3 kicks. Fists did what fists are supposed to do, and that was destroy. I'm not impressed with the French bread.
That was brutal. Both loaves were destroyed. A pile of broken crust and crumbs. I know I'd have to buy more if I was going to proceed with this quest. As I pulled out the parking lot, the main thought running through my head was this: I'm glad I'm not a loaf of bread. Schwebel's Bakery and Nichols Bakery both declined to be interviewed for this project. I felt at the beginning that I needed their professional experience, but after several unreturned phone calls and fruitless requests for their involvement, I realised something. Maybe they didn't have the answer either. Maybe nobody does. Speaking of bread, I had a spare French stick in my trunk, but I was fresh out of Italian, so I picked up a crusty loaf from a local merchant on the way to my next stop, the soccer field at Youngstown State University. Katie Hohmann, right outside midfielder for the Youngstown State University soccer team. Agile, aggressive, physical. I wanted to put the bread to the ultimate test. She said she put it in the back of the net. Game on. Textbook penalty. Italy takes an early lead. Disappointing. The French loaf splits and doesn't even cross the line. It's a mess. No. So Katie, which one did best?
The Italian. Stayed very together and compact.
And what happened to the French?
French just broke in half.
Broke in half.
Crumbled.
A pattern was emerging. Italian was proving itself the tougher bread over and over. In the contest of physical toughness then, there is no contest. But there's more to being the best at pure physicality. Physical resilience only goes so far. You've got to test mental aptitude too. Who would perform better under stress? The only way I could find out is to speak to the cops. This is Sergeant Chris Moffitt of the City of Hubbard Police Department. Hubbard is a safe, quiet town 6 miles from Youngstown. Moffitt works very hard to keep it that way. He volunteered his time and the use of a holding cell for the night, so we can see which bread would fare better under lock and key. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw the next morning. I've seen loaves torn and beaten, subjected to violence I couldn't possibly imagine sustaining. But when Moffitt opened the cell, broken bread took on a whole new meaning. Nobody could say what happened overnight, and I prayed I never found out. A seasoned officer though, Moffitt said he'd seen this before.
24 hours in the slammer, we'll test it.
I drove through Hubbard and Liberty and downtown Youngstown in a bid to clear my head and make sense of what I've discovered. I headed for the park. I needed some space to process all of this. Besides, I had a trunk full of broken bread, and I know a bunch of hungry geese who aren't that discerning when it comes to a free brunch. If you're looking for an analysis of flavour, you're out of luck, I'm afraid. You'll have to do your own research. But if you're looking for a bread that can withstand a firefight, can hold up its own in the ring, and can take on college athletes at their own game, and remain stoic after a night in the cells, it'll have to be this, the Italian.